60 years ago, the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted, and nuclear war came close. By Angelo Baracca. On October 14, 1962, a U.S. U-2 spy plane flying over Cuba revealed that the Soviet Union was building ramps for the installation of missiles with nuclear warheads. President Kennedy immediately ordered a naval blockade of Cuba, the most serious crisis since the beginning of the Cold War began. For 13 endless days, the Soviet Union and the United States faced off, coming close to war. The whole world waited with bated breath. And indeed, not only did we get close to World War III, but also to nuclear Armageddon. The reason that none of this came to pass was the cool-headedness of a Soviet captain, Vasily Arkhipov, and perhaps also, quite independently, of his American counterpart, William Bassett, although we have only a posthumous testimony. Since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, comparisons have been made from many quarters with that crisis 60 years ago. Indeed, there are not only a few commonalities, but also many points of difference. History is a great teacher. In fact, it is the only guide we have for the present, but it is necessary to put it in context. At that time, 15 years after the end of World War II, and the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was no international agreement on arms control, much less on the nuclear arsenals that were becoming the focus of military confrontation between the two blocs. By about 1960, the U.S. had about 30,000 nuclear warheads, the USSR about 5,000, enough for total devastation. Intercontinental missiles were in their infancy, and the USSR had only about 20 capable of reaching U.S. territory. Britain built their bomb in 1952, France in 1960 in collaboration with Israel. China did not reach that point until 1964. Incidentally, the doomsday clock established in 1947 had touched 2 minutes to midnight, the metaphor for the end of the world, in 1953 with the Korean War, when indeed MacArthur wanted to drop nuclear bombs on the North. But by 1960 it had been reset to 7 minutes, and in 1963 to 12 minutes, so it does not record the threat in 1962, which in fact was only known many years later. Here is the first difference to the current situation. Also at that time, in 1959, the United States had deployed missiles with nuclear warheads capable of striking the Soviet Union in Italy, at Gioia del Colle, Apulia, southern Italy, and in Turkey in great secrecy. Of course, Moscow suspected, and it could be argued that it knew, but as there were no spy satellites at the time, and only the U.S. had U-2 spy planes capable of flying high over other countries, it can therefore be argued, certainly not justified, that Khrushchev's decision in 1962 to secretly deploy nuclear missiles to Cuba was an act of defense, albeit an extremely risky one. And this is where there is, in my view, an analogy to the present, the expansion of NATO, a nuclear alliance, eastward to Russia's borders, which Moscow perceived as a threat. However, one might ask how the Cold War situation would have developed if the existence of Soviet missiles in Cuba had only been discovered when it was a done deal, and the nuclear threat had been balanced between U.S. missiles in Italy and Turkey, and Soviet missiles in Cuba. Even though this is a rhetorical question, history is not made with ifs. Perhaps the necessary push for nuclear disarmament agreements would have happened much sooner. There is another aspect to consider when assessing Washington's behavior in 1962. Throughout the crisis, from October 14 to 28, the U.S. General Staff insisted on military action to eliminate the missile ramps before they became operational. Little did they know that there were already 140 Soviet nuclear warheads in Cuba. Another thing the U.S. commanders ignored is that, in the meantime, Khrushchev had sent several submarines to Cuba, escorting merchant ships bound for the island, each equipped with a torpedo boat with a 10 KT nuclear warhead, slightly less than the Hiroshima one. The team of 4 diesel-powered submarines was under the command of Captain Vasily Arkhipov, who was aboard the flagship B-59, but was not its commander. On each submarine, the final decision to launch the nuclear torpedo required the consent of the commander and the political officer. But on the B-59, the commander of the entire squadron, namely Arkhipov, was also required to consent. And this is where the dramatic affair is triggered, a fact that would not become known for many years. It was on that fateful day, October 27, 1962, that a U.S. naval team spotted the B-59 submarine in international waters and began an all-out hunt to force it to surface. Tensions on board were sky-high. The Arctic Fleet's submarine ventilation system malfunctioned in the Atlantic. The temperature inside the submarine rose to 45-50 degrees. Carbon dioxide levels also rose. The crew, 78 members, were hardly able to breathe. It was impossible to contact Moscow, and under American pursuit, the captain of the B-59, Savitsky, was convinced that war had broken out. He didn't want to sink without a fight, so he decided to launch a nuclear warhead at the aircraft carrier. "We will die too, but we will take them with us." The political officer agreed with the captain, but on the flagship B-59, Archipov's consent was also needed. World War III, nuclear war, hung in the balance on his decision. And Arkhipov objected to, reasoned with, and convinced the commander. On October 27, the crisis was at its height. A U.S. U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, and another over Russia was almost intercepted. Kennedy negotiated for the withdrawal of Soviet missiles from Cuba in exchange for a promise not to invade the island again, as the U.S. had done a year earlier by organizing the landing of Cuban counter-revolutionaries at the Bay of Pigs. The Soviet freighters turned back, and on October 28, Khrushchev announced that he had ordered the removal of the missiles from Cuba. Arkhipov convinced Commander Savitsky to surface the B-59. He refused U.S. fighter assistance and headed for Russia. His mission had failed. Arkhipov continued to serve in the Soviet Navy. His role in having saved the world remained unknown, until shortly before his death in 1998 at age 72. His wife, Olga, recounted a few years later, "I was and always will be proud of my husband. He is the man who saved the world." October 27 should be proclaimed Arkhipov Day. But there is another not insignificant aspect of the affair that became known only 50 years later. I pointed out that the deployment of nuclear missiles in foreign territories by Washington was being carried out secretly. And so they had also done in 1961 in Japan, in Okinawa, which Khrushchev clearly suspected, although their range could hit parts of China and not the USSR. The Kennedy tapes revealed that this was unknown to President Kennedy himself, who was elected in January 1961, and that he was informed of it just as the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted. In any case, in his televised address on Oct. 22, 1962, a week after the crisis broke out, Kennedy had the impudence to say, "Our strategic missiles have never been transferred to the territory of another nation under a cloak of secrecy and deception." So it was not until 2015 that a testimony emerged from a serviceman named Bordney, serving in Okinawa, that on that very fateful night of October 27, his superior, William Bassett, deceased in 2011, received an order to launch the nuclear missiles. But he sensed something wrong in that order, stalled, asked for clarification, insisted twice, and finally received the counter-order. Stop everything, so today we can tell this story. And it is very appropriate to remember it, because things are no longer like that. With the objective of avoiding human error, there has been a tendency to entrust nuclear weapons control to automation. The crucial problem is error, the high rate of false positives in predicting rare events. Unfortunately, a machine's decision will be irrevocable. Not only can machines make mistakes, but they can also be fooled by false signals. An article in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists last January commented, "If artificial intelligence controlled nuclear weapons, we might all be dead." Today, there can no longer be a man with the authority and responsibility to verify or contradict a nuclear alert, as even Colonel Stanislav Petrov did on 26 September 1983. The parallel between the Cuban Missile Crisis and the resurgence of the nuclear nightmare is certainly evocative, but inadequate. With the 1962 agreement to withdraw Soviet missiles from Cuba, the U.S. granted, in return, something of fundamental importance to the military balance. Later, to conceal the connection with the agreement reached with Moscow on October 28, 1962, the U.S. withdrew its missiles deployed in Turkey and Italy. In recent years, security in Europe has been compromised by NATO's eastward extension. What concession could the U.S. offer to restore it? Angelo Baracca is professor of physics at the University of Florence, Italy. Writer and scientist specializing in nuclear matters. Pacifist activist and ecologist, he writes for Presenza about nuclear questions. This article was originally published by Presenza. The Beyond Nuclear International website is its own, and does not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Beyond Nuclear. The public should understand the connections between nuclear power and nuclear weapons, and the need to abandon both to safeguard our future. I will tell you his backstory. For the Soviet general, see Vasily Arkhipov, General. Vice Admiral Vasily Arkhipov, born Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov, 30 January 1926, Zvorkovo, Moscow Oblast, Russian SFSR. Soviet Union, died 19 August 1998. Aged 72, Zheleznodorozhny, Moscow Oblast. Russia, buried in the Pershivskoe Cemetery, Moscow Oblast. Russia, branch of the Soviet Navy, service years 1945-1988. Rank Vice Admiral, conflicts, World War II, Cuban Missile Crisis, awards Order of the Red Banner, Order of the Red Star, Future of Life. Awards spouse Olga Arkhipova, children Yelena Andreyukova. He was transferred to the Caspian Higher Naval School, Azerbaijan Higher Naval School, where he graduated in 1947. He then served aboard submarines of the Black Sea, Northern and Baltic fleets. Awards and honors. His actions on board B-59, Arkhipov received the first Future of Life Award, which was presented posthumously to his family in 2017.